now the mayor's report. I'll ask Chief Satterwhite as to present your report of HPD dealing with our it's suspended due to lack of personnel. Members, I'd been in office a month. Chief Finner called me on a Friday at 7 o'clock from out of town, said he was headed back to Houston. We had an urgent problem that the press had gotten a hold of a policy. Research shows that it was officially adopted by HPD in 2016. Chief Finner said there was a case that was bringing him back to Houston, and probably one of the more shocking discoveries during my administration that we knew public safety was a top issue, certainly my highest issue and highest priority, but had no way to be aware, and some of you that have been here the previous 4 years, I'm going to assume no one shared with you that 260,000 plus cases had not been investigated because they were suspended due to lack of personnel. Lack of personnel was first told to a council body in 2014. But anyway, we went to work. Chief Finner had his first press conference February 22nd. At that time, there were 4,017 sexual assaults revealed, and then shortly thereafter, 264,000. So I've asked HPD to give us the report of their review. My independent group reviewing it is completing their draft as we talk, but it's probably the most shocking thing that you will discover during your public service. And I want to thank the leadership of HPD, Chief Finner, Chief Satterwhite, Chief Ten. We have the command staff here this morning. They immediately put additional resources. We gave through the city budgeting $3 million for overtime, and all the consultants, certainly the sexual assault victims, they've all received counseling, consultation. I'm just going on. 45 officers were pulled off other divisions that have been spending many, many hours, and I will yield at this time to Chief Satterwhite, but the commitment certainly from me is that we will not rest until this is fixed. I think you'll be seeing changes in operations very soon, but we have a very good police force. It is shocking to me as someone that was chairman of criminal justice that no one brought it to me actually before I ran for mayor. We would have addressed it at the legislature if we'd have had to, but no one ever imagined the number of cases that were not. And I will just close by this. The misinformation of my coming in and being sworn in that the public was told one safe Houston. If you listen to these details, you'll understand why the public made public safety the highest priority last November in the mayor's, and I would suggest the council races. Chief Satterwhite.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having me here today. And I want to acknowledge my team behind me who worked very hard on this report.
Speak into the mic, Chief.
Yes, sir. Is that better? So thank you all for having me here today. I thank my team behind me and all the men and women of the Houston Police Department that have helped worked through this and as we try to work out of this. My role here today is to talk about the suspended lack of personnel code and the investigations that it represents that occurred in the department. I'm going to talk to you about what happened. I'm going to talk to you about how it happened, why it happened, and what we have done in an effort to try to correct this failure that occurred in our department. I want to first and foremost state that there are real victims in the public that were affected by this. And that is something that we all bear, and we all know, and we all want to correct and take care of those real victims of this issue, this bad policy that was enacted in our department, and the outcomes of that policy and how it affected them. So for that, first and foremost, our priority is to those victims. So now I will go into the PowerPoint presentation. I will tell you that there is an executive report that is much more comprehensive that was released online this morning for all of the public. We're not running from anything. We're not hiding from anything. Where we made mistakes, where we failed, we're going to tell you, and it's in the report. I will say that throughout my presentation, at times, there will be names, colleagues, that will emerge. The reason for that is most of those names are already out in the public. They're good people. They're good men and women that served the city for decades and all had the right intent. Everybody wanted to do more. Everybody wanted to help. Were mistakes made? Yes, they were. The biggest mistake that I've been able to see is just a failure to recognize what was going on and a failure to go in and truly try to correct it, or to verify and follow up and make sure that it was being corrected. That's a failure of leadership, and it's a systematic failure in our department, and I think we all have to own it, from supervisors at the sergeant level all the way to the chief level. There was times that maybe things could have been done, but I will tell you primarily at the executive level is where we should have asked more questions, where we should have done more, and I'm talking about chiefs and up, that we could have done more and should have done more throughout this 8-year period that I'm about to describe. So with that, I will go into it and try to explain it as best as I can, and then at any given time, if you have a question, you can certainly ask, and at the end, I'll also take questions. So, next slide. This is just the agenda. I will tell you right up front, this is a rather lengthy report. I will try to get through it as quickly as possible, but I need to make sure that I do the diligence of giving you the findings. So obviously, we're going to go through the history of it first, then the key findings of it, how we responded, the Mayor's Oversight Board Recommendations Committee, where we are at the moment, and then what were next steps for this. So the first slide you see is a staffing slide. Many of you have seen this slide many times before in different presentations. This is going to be key to how or why this occurred. Frankly, it just comes largely in part to staffing. In 1998, we reached our high number in HPD at 5,500 officers classified. At the same time, we had almost 2,000 civilians helping us, doing all those duties that are really necessary and critical to the role of serving the public. Compliance issues, calling complainants back, all of those duties and tasks. So that was what we had in 1998. Today, we have 300 fewer classified officers. We have 1,100 to be more precise, 1,100 fewer civilians, meaning that officers now have to do jobs that the civilians were doing because that's the requirement of the department. We are severely understaffed, and that is going to be one of the base causes of how this happened. It doesn't excuse it. What happened in our department is unexcusable, and we're going to have to correct that. You have a good department. You have fantastic men and women that are putting it on the line every day, trying to make a difference, trying to do things better. But simply put, we don't have enough of them. Next slide. So this shows you a different graph, and it talks about our recruiting and our attrition. And as you can see, in many cases over the years since 2009, attrition topped recruiting. We simply weren't able to keep up. There's a lot of reasons for that. In recent years, we've had real challenges with the pandemic and the nationwide, and of course, the civil unrest that occurred after the murder of George Floyd. We saw a significant drop across the country in law enforcement. Officers were retiring in droves. So the efforts we were making to try to recruit, we were losing that fight with all else that was going on. And those numbers kind of show you where that is and show you why we have not truly grown. I will tell you it's also a funding issue, because for 20 years plus we have been asking for more officers, and in many times the funding just wasn't there. So it wasn't just the challenges, it's funding, it's competition with other cities. We have many cities right here in the state of Texas that pay far more than we pay. And it's a challenge to recruit to this, because qualified, capable young men and women who want to do this profession, which we desperately need, they have options, they have choices. And if we don't fund, if we don't recruit, if we don't pay well enough, then we are not in a good place to get them to come to us as opposed to other locations. And this is another challenge. Next slide, please. So this one is a table of the numbers, and it's going to have relevance in the next couple of slides from 2014 to 2024 today. And it goes to show you the exact numbers of actual officer staffing that we had in 2014, and the actual number that we have today, both classified and civilian. And this is going to matter to you in just a minute. Next slide. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a timeline as we build up to this. And that is that in 2010, when Mayor Parker was sworn in, you can see Chief McClellan was appointed as Chief of Police. At that time, he already knew we were short on officers. He already knew we had a real problem. He had been on the department for 34 years, as many years as I've been on now. At that time, that's how many years he had been on. And he knew we knew more. So we got approved a study, a JustX PERF study that we went through, that it was conducted in 2013, of the department staffing and what we needed. Next slide. From that study came the information that you see before us. We were very critically short. And there's a statement by Chief McClellan in 2014 to this very council, Horseshoe. And so it was different people at that time, but this is what Chief McClellan had. Next slide, we actually have it to play.
I've been with the Houston Police Department over 37 years. During that 37 years, there has never been a time that I have been employed there that the Houston Police Department has the capacity to investigate every crime that's been reported to the agency. This is not unique to the Houston Police Department. Other police department gives us a sexy name called early case closure. If there are no solvability factors or workable leads on a property crime, we don't assign it. We work violent crimes first. But if someone steals your trash can or your lawnmower out of your garage, there's no witnesses, there's no evidence, there's nothing for a detective to follow up on, it's not assigned.
So if we go to 2015, if you
I've been with the Houston Police Department over...
Next slide. When we go to 2015, this is a real problem in our department, and case investigation is a real problem, as you can see from Chief McClellan's own words 10 years ago, that we couldn't investigate all of the cases and all the crime that is occurring. And they, again, I will iterate again, at that time, there were more HPD classified officers and more civilians than there are today. That's just where we are today. So many things were being discussed in how we might overcome some of that. One of the problems that we had was there were cases that were being suspended, but it was just a general suspension. And there was no knowledge and no understanding of, was it suspended because there were no workable leads? Was it suspended because a patrol had made an arrest? Or was it suspended because we lacked the personnel to investigate it. We just didn't have enough people, enough investigators to do it. So at that time, the conversation occurred between then Executive Assistant Chief Tim Ottmeyer and Assistant Chief Don McKinney, knowing that we needed to know exactly how the cases were being suspended, because the intent was that those cases that were suspended because there were workable leads, but we didn't have enough people, their intent was to know those cases, and at the promise of more investigators, more police officers, the ability down the road that we were going to be able to go back into those as we initially got more officers, because everybody then at the Horseshoe was saying that we needed more. Everybody agreed with that, but it just never happened. But that was the hope. That was the intent. They needed to know the difference, and that was a policy that was enacted. It was enacted, and it was also, in 2016, became policy. And we'll go to, before I say that, after Chief's budget, there was also a work group finding at that time that recommended, we had a study done, and it was recommending standardized coding and the need for constant guidance. And again, that's why Chief Ottmeyer and Chief McKinney created these codes. Those codes were then entered into policy in 2016. It started under Chief McClellan. Chief McClellan retired in February of that year, 2016, and Chief Martha Montalvo took over as interim, and the policy went to her for her signature. So then, as the date, we actually know the date. It was early March when the very first time the suspended LICA personnel code was used. As the year went on, there was another inspection, another audit completed by the Inspections Division on special victims specifically. And basically the result of that was that we had a significant backlog and there was insufficient staffing, and we needed to increase staffing at that time in the Special Victims Division.
Excuse me, when it became the policy, were officers actually trained in the use of this code?
Yes, sir, they were. They were trained in the use of it in July and August. Officers were trained. I will say our first major failing was that there were no parameters or guidelines established when the code was established.
In fact, your testimony is it was broadly used and not distinguishing the violent cases from the nonviolent or property crimes versus personal assault. It was just a blanket. If you can't get to the cases, you labeled them and moved on.
Yes, sir. Effectively, that's what happened. I will say I don't think that they ever envisioned it being used this way. I know because no one would, but without the guidance, without the guidelines, the parameters or guardrails, however you want to say that, it did become available to every investigative division in the department. The training did not put in guardrails that we can tell or guidelines. It just said, because the volume was so massive, investigators not possibly being able to get to all the cases, they were in triaging. They were looking at the cases that had the most solvability and were working on those, taking the cases that were weaker, had workable leads, could have led to an arrest or charge, but was going to be much more difficult. There was no guarantee of that or even probability of that, and they were suspending them with the hope of getting more people or a better lead coming in that could be reopened. That was the philosophy. That was the goal, the intent. In practice, very few of those cases all the way up until this year were ever opened again. So once they were suspended, they were never revisited. Next slide.
And obviously, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think it's worth emphasizing. We're including murders, and even the case that ultimately brought all this to our attention was a rape case.
Yes, sir. And
I'm moving that prior. Yes, you're going to cover that.
Yes, sir.
I just think we have to emphasize how broad this was and what is so shocking that it was never brought to certainly the public nor even department executives' attention.
Yes,
Anyway, go ahead.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. It's not, I just want to emphasize the seriousness of this. This is not car break-ins or property crimes. These are the worst, some of the worst cases.
Yes, sir. That is true, and I will be covering all of that. Yes, sir. But so yes, and I just think that the investigators, the code was part of policy, and the cases were stacking and the requirements, and so again, those with less solvability, still workable leads, were suspended in the hopes of more people. But yes, sir, it also ended up involving very serious sexual assault and other person-on-person, very severe crimes, including homicide, ultimately. So that next slide, 2017, Chief Acevedo is appointed in 2017. Also during that time, I'm sorry, he's appointed in 2016, the end of 2016. In 2017, a new commander goes over to the Special Victims Division, which investigates sexual assault both of children and of adults, and also the other crimes that occur of a sexual nature, and it could be serious enough to be aggravated sexual assault of a child, but it also all the way down to things, threats or things of a sexual nature, or even inappropriate touching. So it crosses the broad spectrum of crimes. All of those are investigated through them. So a new captain comes in at that time and recognizes a backlog in the children's section and the children's crimes against children's unit of 1,600, and immediately goes to the department, goes up the chain, ultimately to, at that time, Chief Matt Slinkard and to Chief Troy Fenner, who were both executive assistant chiefs at that time, asking for more officers because they needed to clear that backlog of sex crimes against children. And the SVD was allotted 17 investigators at that time, and they did clear those cases. And they enacted a policy that no child sex assault case would ever be suspended again. Unfortunately, it was still active in the adult sex crime section and was not corrected. So that was still going on at that time. In addition, fast forwarding to 2018, the homicide division traditionally had investigated family violence and major assaults, but in 2018 we carved it out and created the major assaults and family violence division, separate from a homicide division, and that'll have importance down later. At that same time in 2018, we highly publicized, we already know, of an email that was forwarded all the way up to Chief Acevedo from Commander Deese at that time in Vehicular Crimes Division, including Assistant Chief Cheryl Victorian and Executive Assistant Chief Troy Fenner, that a case was suspended and he was raising concerns about it. And Chief Fenner at that time responded, and it's already in public, that it was unacceptable, which is exactly the right answer, that it was unacceptable, and to follow up and get back with him. Unfortunately, again, it stopped there, that we can tell that nothing else was done, and the code was allowed to continue to be used. In 2020, we had another statewide audit mandated for all, and special victims for all departments investigating sex crimes. And it was also of the Houston Police Department. Unfortunately, It did talk about backlog. It did talk about the need, but it did not address or focus on the suspended lack of personnel code. It was another opportunity to decide to see what was going on, to look deeper, but we never did. We never looked deeper. We never went forward to find out how this code was being used and where it should not be getting used. Moving on to 2021 on the timeline, Chief Acevedo announced his retirement, and Chief Troy Finner was appointed Chief of Police. Again, I am telling you many things that have already been in the public eye, but we're trying to be thorough with the timeline and this report. I will also say in the middle of this that while a lot of people on the police department helped create this report and did the investigation to figure out what happened, there was also input from the Independent Oversight Committee. Thank you, Mayor. So this is what you are seeing today is a combination of internal investigation, audit, what happened and why it happened and what we're doing about it, but also the input, as you'll see later on, from the outside entities to include the Houston Area Women's Center, a lot of outreach communities that reach out to women and children who are victims, as well as the Mayor's Independent Oversight and others. So this report and everything that you see online is not just the product of HPD. But in 2021, Chief Acevedo retires and Chief Finner becomes chief. In July of that year, a sergeant in Executive Chief Matt Slinker's office, after speaking with his wife, comes to him and tells him about the use of the code. There's a blue, it's all shown there, but again, in the public eye. And immediately, Chief Slinker begins working on trying to address the code. There's conversations that occur between him and Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones, who was over investigative and special operations, as well as Deputy Director Diana Poore at that time, on the creation of a circular to stop using the code, as well as policy to be enacted. And there was a discussion to go into a lot of detail. It was a back and forth, and the decision being is that did the circular need to go out department-wide or not? And you can see what's written on there from each of them at different times. And it was clear from this circular and what was writing is that while the circular was not elected to go out department-wide, it was to be put in place in all investigative divisions and to address and not use the code anymore, and to also fix it in all standard operating procedures of our department to ensure that it's not used, and certainly not used inappropriately. During that same time, while that discussion and the circular was being discussed, we had a November 4th executive staff meeting in 2021. Also, again, in the public arena, already been discussed. But at that time, we had a commander over our Special Victims Division, Commander Lee Kahn, who presented at that executive staff to Chief Finner and the executive staff about the use of the code and the backlog. Her intent was to they needed more people. They needed more investigators. They were falling behind. Cases were having to be suspended, serious cases. Chief Finner has already stated publicly that he ordered the code to stop being used at that time and to investigate what happened there with others in the room. Unfortunately, again, apparently it did not get conveyed to everybody. The circular never went out, and no one was ever told below that executive staff meeting that we can tell, with the exception of a few, to stop using it and to dig deep into it. I will say that throughout this whole history of this incident, or this failure in our department, the biggest fail again is that there was no follow-up, there was no checking in, there was no looking back to say what actually is going on, And is it the right thing to do, and how do we fix it if we had, because this could have been fixed many years ago, and it's unfortunate that it did not until now. Next slide. So in 2023, in September of 2023, we had a robbery occur at a fiesta on the North Freeway. The suspect broke into the back through a garbage chute, went in to rob the fiesta in the early morning hours. As patrol was called and as officers were arriving, the suspect, before they were able to get around to the perimeter, the suspect made it out of the back. He was on a bicycle. He rode into a neighborhood, forced his way into a home where a mother and father were getting ready for work early, and children were still asleep. And he tied up the father, the husband, and he sexually assaulted the wife. I made that scene. I first went to the robbery. I got the call. I made that scene. We got video of the suspect. It wasn't best, but we had some video of the suspect. I went to the house, and everybody was appalled, and we wanted this individual off the street before he could hurt somebody else. So the investigation continued, and our through robbery division was taking lead on this. The suspect did leave physical evidence behind that was entered into CODIS, and we got a hit through CODIS of a prior sexual assault that occurred almost 1 year earlier in 2022 in September. And in that case, we had a complainant who stated that she felt like she had been sexually assaulted after staying with a friend. She didn't have a ton of information to offer, but she did have a name, a description, and a vehicle. Patrol made the scene. Patrol took all the information, wrote a report, and facilitated her getting a sexual assault kit completed, a SANE kit completed at that time. That case went to our Special Victims Division and subsequently was suspended like a personnel. So when we got the CODIS hit, we went back to the original investigation and ultimately identified the suspect, got him in custody, got him off the street, and got him charged. At that time, the question across everybody was, how could this happen? What's going on? And how bad is it? And this is at the end of last year. So we did a deep dive, which for the first time, into how it actually happened and how this could have been done. And at that time, over the course of the next month and a half, we discovered over 4,000 sexual assault cases in the Special Victims Division that had been suspended lack of personnel. And we discovered overall throughout the department 264,000 cases that had been suspended lack of personnel. Now, since then, you've seen a lot of press news conferences on this. This is the first time we did the deep dive to find out, and then actually took on March 1st, after Chief Fenner had gone before to make this announcement, an actual policy came out to suspend and order not to use the code anymore on March 1st, which is the first time across the department that this went out. We'll also say, Mayor Whitmire, you yourself took over at the beginning after the conclusion of the 8-2 terms for Mayor Turner, and so I know that you were heavily involved at this point. But the scope of this and the magnitude of this truly wasn't known until early February. We knew about the one case, the case that broke it all open, but we didn't find out the whole story until later. Since then, We have been working very hard to correct this. So before I go into that, I'll cover some key findings that we've already done, and then I will go into what we've done to correct that. So as you see on your key findings, next slide, please. First thing was that the code was created in 2016 to get information on how, more detailed information on how cases were being suspended, specifically workable leads, no workable leads, lack of personnel with no workable leads or workable leads. Also suspended no workable leads and suspended patrol arrest. That was done in 2016. And then bullet point 2, from 2016 to 2024, a total of 264,000 cases were suspended, lack of personnel, but did have workable leads. Cases with workable leads. Bullet point 3, or key finding number 3, this is some of the environment that we're operating in. Our RMS system is terribly antiquated. It doesn't work for what we are trying to do. I do have good news that we have a new RMS system that will be going live in March of 2025, first quarter of next year, but we are still dealing with an antiquated system and trying to do workarounds on it. Truly, we couldn't even actually fully take the code out of the system because it would have crashed everything. So when it was decided you cannot use this code and don't suspend cases with workable leads, we still had to guard against that with training and guidance to make sure it was never used. Key finding number 4, there was a lot of governance at the time when it comes to the RMS technology. We also had significant transfer. I think I could probably go back to that. I should have. One of the things that happened from 2016 to 2017, bear in mind, in 2016 is when the code was created by executive staff. All of those executive staff retired from 16 to 17. The only ones still remaining that were on the executive staff at that time were executives at that time, Assistant Chief Fenner, Assistant Chief Slinkard, and Assistant Chief Charlie Vasquez, who has since retired in 2017. But those are the only ones. Everybody else retired. And in some cases, took with them a lot of institutional knowledge, especially about the use of these codes that could help. This is something that we're working to correct, and any transfers of authority and any transfers of leadership to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Key finding number 5, it was created in 2016, and all investigative divisions could use this code. As a matter of fact, the entire department, and actually training went out to everybody, all the investigators, specifically the Special Victims Division and the Major Assaults Family Violence Division, formalized this code in their standard operating procedures. Key finding number 6, and the problem from all of this, again, is there were no guardrails or parameters. I think there was an expectation that surely you would never use it for certain cases. Unfortunately, it was, because it wasn't in policy, and it ended up being used in cases that we should never have used it for. Key finding number 7, and this is an important note that I'll also end up closing with. We still don't have enough people. We still will have to triage cases. I've given an order, and everybody understands the order and the policy that no serious violent crimes or person-on-person crimes of significant nature would ever be suspended just because you don't have enough people. We are investigating person-on-person crimes no matter what. We will take it to the extent that we can take it all the way through until we either exhaust all leads, file charges, make an arrest, or close it in another appropriate fashion. But I want to now say, and I will close with this too, that will come at the expense of property crime. Nonviolent crime will still suffer because we do not have enough people. We will still have cases where people are victims of a property crime that will sit longer and not have the attention because we have to focus on violent crime. That is our number one priority. And that's something I don't want to tell you, and certainly in this position, but that is honesty. Next slide. And it pretty much sums that up in that last key finding. We simply cannot investigate all crimes. Not until we get more people, and we desperately need more people. Next slide is the departmental response and what we actually did to correct this suspended lack of personnel, especially in our violent crimes being Special Victims Division, major assaults and family violence, homicide, those, and robbery to a lesser extent. But we've been working to correct that. So the first thing we did was we've had, and since the beginning of this, we've had open and transparent communications with the mayor. I know that Chief Fenner immediately called him when this was coming about, and they've had a conversation at the outset of when the magnitude of this was discovered, and we've maintained those open lines of communication ever since. We've also, the mayor enacted the independent review committee, and we have been closely working with them ever since. Like I said, they also had a part in the creation of what's out here. As a matter of fact, their first presentation that had a timeline, as you will see, will very closely match what we have here. They are constantly doing interviews. They're acting independently, but they're trying to get to the bottom of it, and they're talking to all the people that were involved and trying to get the most accurate information. And that's what we have been doing, too, to try to make sure that you are fully apprised of what happened and what we're doing to fix it. We have an internal investigation that's ongoing. I will say that our internal affairs investigations are more restricted. We have state law that we have to be in compliance with, 143. Employees do have protections, and we have to honor those and make sure that we are making sure that we are protecting and honoring and their rights to this process, and we do it right. So what we can state, I will state, but what we cannot state, then we cannot state it. So the lead group that has been working on this naturally has been our Criminal Investigations Command, obviously because this has primarily occurred within investigations. We went immediately, we brought in personnel to start reviewing. We established priorities. We developed guidelines for governance to ensure that this review of all this 264,000 cases was done properly, transparently, and acceptable to you all and to the public who we answer to. We actually created scripts because we knew that we would be going and knocking on doors or talking to people, especially in special victims, with all the thousands that we had who were victims of some of the worst crimes, potentially, that we wanted to make sure that when we did go to them, we did make contact, that we were not making things worse for them by reopening old wounds, but we needed to get to the bottom of it. We needed to get the investigations done. Frankly, if there was a bad guy out there, we needed to get him off the street, or girl. And so we developed scripts. We did that in concert with a lot of our outreach groups. Emily Whitehurst and Sonia Corrales in Houston Area Women's Center, and so many more. We wanted to make sure we did this right, so we've been working with all of them side by side, and they've been great partners as we tried to overcome this and reach out to those people, especially those women and men, children that potentially were victims of this. And we've had regular meetings, and it's almost a daily matter to make sure that we were doing things set right, and we were following up, and we were adjusting as we needed to. We implemented quality assurance and quality control measures, a process for follow-up on all these investigations to make sure this never happens again, and we are monitoring at every level possible. We work with our Houston Forensic Science Center and our Harris County District Attorney's Office, and they have been heavily involved in the response to all of these cases and how we do that. Next slide. So now some division specific. things that have been going on. The Special Victims Division being the one that we were focused on first. There were over 9,000 reports that were classified or coded suspended lack of personnel. And you've all heard the number 4,017. That is the number of cases that were titled sexual assault. We've also had approximately 94 CODIS hits that we've investigated that came out of this. So we went to work on those first, trying to make sure that we were getting that we were trying to serve those potential victims out there, and there were real victims, as best as we could, and get any perpetrators off the street as quickly as possible. We increased the capacity of the division by 32 people, and overall we have had a constant 80-plus people officers working on this on a daily basis to try to go through all of these cases, not to mention personnel assigned to each of these divisions that have been going through it. But this is Special Victims. I will also say that we have a partner in the Texas Forensic Center of Excellence, which specifically are forensic nurses, certified nurses, and we've been working with them closely to try to create as much access by potential victims as possible so that they can see a forensic nurse to do a forensics exam anytime, 7 days a week, and not just during business hours. Continuing on the next slide, you can actually see where we are in the Special Victims Division. We've reviewed 79% of the cases thus far. All of the serious ones, what we can term priority 1 and priority 2, the most serious where people were harmed, where people potentially were sexually assaulted or anything near that, we've reviewed all those cases first. We've received final disposition in 57 of them. The numbers are there. So of the 9,000, 7,100 plus have been reviewed, and a final disposition in 5,000. There are still a lot of open cases. These cases are very complex. They take time. It's not something you can do quickly, and so there are still a lot of open cases. We have gone through the ones that we think that were titled and were most serious, but that review is going on, and there is a possibility we will discover one that was not titled appropriately, that may on the surface did not seem serious, that may be. We simply are still working our way through and doing the best process we can to make sure we get to them. Next slide. Same thing for major assaults and family violence. Over 109,000 cases that were suspended, lack of personnel. We reviewed them. 800 plus of them were titled as family violence. We've been working through all those. We've touched all those that were serious, be it family violence or the most serious, priority 1 and priority 2 group, major assault cases by title we've reviewed. Ultimately, we reviewed over half of the 109,000 and what we could see were the most serious, and we've reached final disposition in 18% of them. Next slide. Homicide Division, as I said earlier, used to do investigations on major assaults and family violence too, until those two units were carved out and then made their own division, major assaults, family violence. So during that time, most of the 6,537 reports you see there were actually major assaults and family violence. But still, as they were listed as homicide, and the division has been working on it, 100% reviewed, 32% having reached final disposition. All along, the thought is there were no murders. We have since discovered at least 2 that were ultimately being suspended. They started out as different things. They started out as a large brawl in a parking lot that resulted in what was first thought of as a fatal accident, FSRA, where a victim was driven over and killed. The subsequent investigation and video looked at it, deemed it to be an intentional act, making it a homicide. So it did go to homicide. Unfortunately, at that time, the thought was it was about the assault, and it was sent over to major assault family violence, and it was suspended. The other one was a a person that was wanted for a narcotics warrant or was involved in narcotics criminal activity and was fleeing and had an accident, killing his passenger, and that was also ultimately considered to be a homicide. Those are the two that we know about right now. We may find more, but those are the two we know about right now. So as you can see, like I said, 100% reviewed on those 6,537, 32% having reached final disposition. They're anticipating by August 31st, all the cases will be resolved. Next slide. Property and financial are cases that are not violent. They're on property. 91,484 of those cases. We have 61% reviewed, and we have a final disposition on 21%. They are working, that is mostly from 2023 and 2024 cases, but they are working as expeditious as they can, even on the property crimes, to reach resolution and a final disposition. Next slide. Vehicular crimes, I described earlier, 38,605 reports. Most of these are hit and run with no real solvability factors, but they were suspended like a personnel. 95% of them have been reviewed. 69% have reached final disposition at this point, and the numbers are within the presentation. Next slide. Other divisions collectively, investigative, patrol, special Homeland Security, all other investigations, approximately 9,000 total. Almost all of them have been reviewed and final disposition in almost all of them too. Most of them being miscoded and not violent. Next slide is the response recommendations from the Mayor's Independent Oversight or Review Committee and what we are in that process of meeting their recommendations. One of their first recommendations was written directives and policy changes affecting the entire department. We have completed all of the command and executive command directives, SOPs, to ensure this doesn't happen again. At the division level, because there are nuances between divisions, they are still working to complete their SOPs, but everyone is aware that violent crime, serious violent crime with workable leads will not be suspended or inactivated. And that will be in policy for them. It's already in policy as overall guidance at the command level, which is where they derive their directives for creating their own SOPs. Attendance protocols at all executive staff meetings. I know this was a question of who was at the November 4th meeting and who was not, how long you were and what you remember and what you don't remember, what you are definitively heard was said and what you don't. We did not keep records at that time. We now keep records of who attends every executive staff meeting, and we keep minutes of those meetings. So that is a recommendation, and that is what we have enacted, and it is complete. General standard operating procedures for SOPs, like I said, and case management at the division level are still in progress, but I will tell you this, that no case it will be inactivated or suspended without multiple reviews at different levels to ensure that it is a case that can or should be or should not be. When a case is closed in any other way, whether it is arrest charges or there are no workable leads or the complainant does not want to file or a number of other ways that it might be closed and cleared, it is still reviewed by multiple levels to ensure it was done right. Our process is to ensure this never happens again. Supervisor review, and I think all that's listed there at the last bullet point is simplify the RMS titles, ensuring they are consistent with the Texas Penal Code, and we are aligning that as we go. It is an in progress thing. The next list, which is the process to consistently review bucketed incidents. Again, that is ongoing. That's that quality assurance and quality control effort that we still pull them out on random numbers to make sure that we're doing everything the right way. 24-hour availability of Special Victims Division investigators. That is complete. We already have that. It's not a day shift 9 to 5 job. It is 24/7. Improved coordination with Victim Services Division. I've already spoken about that. We have our own Victim Services Division within HPD, and Director Julie Pleasant is behind me and in the audience. But we have all those outreach communities, all those outreach groups, including HAWK, that we're constantly in dialogue with, working with, to try to always be better and better serve. Updated victim notification, again, that was with HAWK. That's ongoing. Mandatory 55-hour training recommended by HAWK for all of our Special Victims Division investigators. That is ongoing and in progress. Co-facilitated victim trauma center training for patrol officers in the academy. Again, that is in progress. Regarding incident reports with final disposition of inactive, no leads where the victim survivor could not be reached. And just to clarify, every victim, we are taking multiple efforts to try to make contact. Phone, email, social media, and we send officers to doors to go knock in an effort to get a hold of them. But in the event that we simply cannot get a hold of a victim or reach them in any way, the case may be inactivated, but it's still open. And the minute we are able to make contact with that victim, then we proceed with the investigation. And that is complete. Next slide is the status. This is an overall snapshot of where we are. 67% of our cases, or 176,221 of the 264,000 plus cases, have been reviewed. We have a final disposition in 31%, or 81,079. If you look to the right, you'll see that before February 16th, when these processes were being put underway, we had already gone through 1,384 felony and 2,273 misdemeanors. So we were already looking into these cases before we even got all these processes in place. Since then, we have filed charges in 111 felonies and 63 misdemeanors. Most of the cases are still open, and we're still working through them. So next slide and next steps. So we will conclude finalizing all our case management SOPs all the way down to the division and unit level very soon. The orders and the structure and the guidance and the guardrails are already there. The training is already there. We are finalizing because some divisions have very unique parts, duties and responsibilities, so it requires unique standard operating procedures to accommodate and to make sure we have it right. But the overall order is no suspended with workable leads, violent crimes, or serious violent crimes. And then implementing case management training, that's ongoing. We are institutionalizing our QAQC, our quality assurance, quality control, that's already there, and we'll continue to grow that. Exploring ways for technology. We are not going to get enough people in the near term, and we know that. It takes time to hire, train, and to recruit, hire, train, and get them on the line. Technology might be a way to help us make a leap forward with that, and so we are looking at all kinds of technology to help us in investigations so that we can better serve the public. They will also have a price tag to them too, and so when we come to you, we will be asking you to support that. The goal is always, how do we best serve the community with the resources that we have or the resources that we might be able to acquire in a quick fashion. Reviewing allocations for congruence, basically looking across the department, are there places where we can move an officer, an investigator, or a civilian from one job that may not be a high priority to another job that has this high priority? Again, we want to be the best stewards with the resources we already have, and we're trying to do that and make as many leaps forward and get as much, serve the community in the best way possible, and that is looking across everybody's job and prioritizing what is most important and what is most necessary. I will tell you that patrol is necessary. Officers in the field to respond when somebody needs help is critical. Investigations is also critical. Maintain working relationships with all our partners, that is ongoing. The RMS implementation I've already touched on. will be first quarter next year when we have the new RMS out. Until then, we have guidelines and structures in place to work with what we have. Constantly making sure that we are in a line and everybody's involved. When we say fidelity is listed on here, it is getting everybody involved, not just one or two people making a policy decision on RMS. We want all the stakeholders there so that we get it right up front in the first time. Addressing knowledge transfer, I've touched on that too. Again, when people are coming into a division and people are going out of a division, there needs to be a very strong handshake between to make sure that nothing is left, and that occurs at the officer, sergeant, lieutenant, commander, assistant chief, executive assistant chief, and chief of police. At every position, we need to make sure that we're apprising the person coming in that is assuming that responsibility of everything, and that is all, those are always opportunities to see, is there something wrong? Are we missing something? It's been a miss. It was a miss in this particular case from 2016 to 2017 for an entire executive staff changeover, but we're putting policy in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again as much as we can control that. That's the end of the presentation, with the exception, I'll close with this. You have a good police department. You have fantastic men and women that are really trying very hard to go out there and make a difference. What happened here, we have so many successes, and this is not the day to quote them or to say them, I understand that, but you have a good police department. It's understaffed. It needs people. It needs funding. It needs new technologies. It needs vehicles. It needs all those things, and they're all costing. But I'm here to tell you today that's our best chance of best serving the public, so we ask for your help in that. What happened in this particular case, like I said, is overall is not one person or two people. It's not even five. It was a department fail. It was a leadership fail. It was a systemic fail, and that we are working to overcome to take care of those men and women, especially those women and those children who possibly were, who in some cases were, or anybody that might be a victim. Our job is to take care of them and do our very best. And there's no getting away from that, and we all have to own that. I will also say, we have been asking for people for 20 years, like I said, so in some cases the city must also own part of this. Prior administrations, we need more people, and everybody's known that. So the sooner you can help us get more people. I applaud you all and the mayor for allotting the 6th cadet class this year. And while we have a lot of attrition, we are actually going to grow because we were becoming a younger department, me with the exception, but we are becoming a younger department. And those young officers with the right incentives and the right support are going to stick around for a long time. So as we do more cadet classes and we grow, we are going to grow as an agency and better be able to handle the demands, the capacity that comes in. But for now, it will still be a challenge, and it will be for some time in the foreseeable future. Thank you all for having me. I'll take questions.
Chief, before I yield to my colleagues, I want to thank you. I know this has been painful for you because of your love for the department, your love for the rank and file, and you have close friends that have been identified and held accountable. And I know when I called you on May 7th to become the acting chief, how moved you were in terms of your mission in front of you. I've watched the morale of the department improve. I've watched your transparency, and I want to thank you on behalf of all Houstonians. You're a true professional, and I look forward to working with you going forward. As you well know, we're in the recovery for Beryl. Every area of town, we're focusing on debris pickup. I can go on and on. But nothing is more important than your description of this morning of what happened and also the measures that have been put in place to prevent it from happening again. It's sad that it takes what you've documented to get to this point. And obviously, I'm sitting here thinking, what in the world? And I can simply put transparency. Transparency. I know previous chiefs and other city officials have been aware of your shortage. But if we do not allow members to have chiefs and directors to come forward and tell us an accurate picture, Houstonians knew the accurate picture. They didn't quite understand the reason. I didn't either. We knew we were shorthanded. That's the reason I talked about collaboration. Even got criticized for saying we'll partner with the DPS in traffic control and assets. But we have to be transparent, identify the problem, or it'll never get solved. And I think that is a message that I see coming out of this serious discussion. We discussed earlier about protesters. We talk about the university line. I can go on and on that consumes our time. But if we don't fix public safety, nothing else matters. I had no idea when I said fix Houston, the extent and gravity of the matters. We dealt with a freeze our second week, Lakewood shooting, Kingwood, floods, derecho, Beryl. But nothing compares with the gravity of what was revealed on February 7th. And it started out with one case, the Fiesta case, and then grown to the extent that it is. I'm still shocked, having worked with HPD, city leadership, the employee groups, that this could exist for so many years and not become public. I'm just shocked, because you're not going to fix something until you expose it. The fact that it became policy in 2016 and actually started training officers how to use it. I can't believe someone didn't say, can we distinguish nonviolent from violent cases? But this is what we were faced with. I applaud the measures that have been put in place. Let me, before I yield, to let the public know, are you telling us that there's no assaultive cases, person on person, that haven't been reviewed? That would include domestic violence, sexual assaults. Have those been reviewed? And also, they've not been labeled that since orders came down.
Yes, sir. I will answer, but I will also call up two of my colleagues so you can briefly hear from them on those two. But yes, sir, the cases were broken down into what we considered most serious, priority ones and priority twos, whether it was in Special Victims Division or major assaults, family violence, and those have been reviewed. I will ask Executive Assistant Chief Ben Tim to come up and Director Melissa Cummins just to add to that, just to make sure that you have the full answer, sir.
And before we yield to Chief Tim, can you describe for my colleagues and the public the impact of this review has had on other challenges for HPD? We meet regularly and hear about hotspots.
Yes, sir.
And at the time, it was labeled hotspots, whether it's Potomac, it's San Felipe, or South McGregor neighborhoods, or Bissonnette, prostitution, the hotspots. I actually said at the time we labeled it that, they're, in my mind, hotspots across Houston, if in fact Houston's not a hotspot, because of understaffing. And so this just compounded it,
Right, sir.
did it not? Because you had to pull resources from every division to review these cases. So would you be honest with the public while we focus on the most serious? And they're all going to be investigated. Response time, hotspots, and others are going to suffer.
Yes, sir. So the way this was our highest priority, Chief Fenner and then myself, we owe this to the public and to those victims. So we worked at it. So we did pull officers out of field operations, which is primarily patrol and some proactive units, including DRT, which many of you know what DRT is, but for the public, it's officers that handle all those other issues, including hotspot, including the noise ordinance or the places that are creating problems, sources for problems. And we had to pull them in because it was our DRT officers, along with community service officers, that were actually going and knocking on doors and doing reviews and knocking on doors. We don't have any more people. We didn't suddenly have more people. So we went into using overtime, and to date, we spent almost $2.8 million. I have Deputy Director Rhonda Smith in the audience who can speak more about what the cost is. And we brought officers off the streets that might have been doing jobs out there for you all and your council districts to work on this. So there's just no way to do it all. So this became a priority, and this is what we work on. We have a lot of them back out there now doing the jobs that they were originally, or that is their primary job, but we did have to pull them in to get to where we are. And I'm going to defer to EAC's Band 10 and Director Cummins on that.
Yes, sir. Mayor, council members, sir, to answer your question, you're absolutely on point. We, as we review those cases, those suspended with lack of personnel cases, we placed two high priorities, the highest priorities upon our initiative. Number one is all sexual assault related cases within special victims, and all those have been reviewed. And the second one is aggravated assault type, specifically those with a family violence nexus, but as we know, as we look forward on our stats, almost 1 out of 4 homicide cases has a family violence nexus to that. So that is our second highest priority as well, and those have been thoroughly been reviewed.
Thank you. Do you have anything to contribute?
So,
Yes, Mayor. I'd also like to add that there were other areas of the department that were impacted as well. When we talk about our civilian personnel and our
You got to
records
speak a
division.
little closer to the mic.
Yes, sir. When we talk about our records division, our civilian personnel who do the final review and submission of our data to the state, they also have been impacted reviewing the additional supplements. So it has some downstream impacts that we're still working through, but it gives us an opportunity to republish the data, to talk about the differences between what we originally had and now what we have after this review, and to continue to provide as accurate data as we have available to the public.
Thank you, which leads me to this question, Chief, which I think we can't overemphasize. We talk about patrol and investigations, but the administrative jobs at headquarters, it's shocking that you had 2,000 civilians at one time, and through budget cuts at council, it's now to 900. Those jobs still have to be fulfilled. Is that the reason why you have so many uniformed officers doing administrative jobs at headquarters?
It is a big part of that reason, yes, sir, Mayor. I mean, we still have compliance at state, federal, that we have to meet. We still have these other things. Yes, adding civilians back on the team would be a huge help to us. We need more officers. We need more civilians.
Very good. Anything you've left out in terms of prevention going forward?
I just will say again, the public has a great police department. This one hurts. It hurts us all, and but we are going to do everything we can to make it right.
Would it be fair to say our department's in good health? It just needs attention by this council body and certainly the public.
Yes, sir. Right. We enjoy a lot of support from the public, and we enjoy a lot of support from all the council members at this horseshoe, and we really appreciate that. I know everybody here is trying to do their best, and everybody in the public understands this. So the department, we're blessed in that regard because our men and women that go out there every day are met with a lot of love and support from the community, which I'm very thankful for. They are taxed. The overtime hours get long. The responsibilities get long. So the challenges that they face, the very nature of some of the things that they have to go to and respond to, we are doing everything we can to make sure that they are mentally and physically okay. And, of course, this support from additional people would be a huge step in that direction. More officers, more partners on the street, more backup, more investigators to take on the incredible workload that's coming in. So the workload's high, and it creates frustration, and it does wear. There's potential burnout. So you have that, and we've seen that. But I would also say we are blessed in the sense to have so much support through it all.
Well, I'm speaking on behalf of Houstonians. We thank the first responders, and we see the dangers, the rescues that they did in Barrow. So thank them for keeping us safe under very challenging times, understaffed, and certainly we all need to commit ourselves going forward to make our fire, police, all of our city employees recognize how much they're appreciated. Thank you, Councilman Pollard.
Thank you, Mayor. And Chief, thank you for the presentation. It's an unfortunate circumstance that we have to have this presentation. I appreciate your accountability on behalf of all the men and women of the Houston Police Department. I agree with you, this was a systematic failure in many ways, and something that all of us hearing this report, I bet, are pretty alarmed by some of the information that we are receiving. Staffing can never be an issue, in my opinion, when it comes to any of our responsibilities. That's with the police department, that's with the housing department, public works, whoever. We have to find a way to get the job done, and if we can't, we have to properly communicate. I think that as a city, we're not going to police our way out of every single issue. You all cannot do everything all the time. We also have to look at jobs and education, vocational training, housing, mental health. How can we reduce the amount of crime that is being committed by providing more resources outside of just the department? And I think that's where we have to be creative in doing so. As it relates to this presentation, what was conveyed to the public as the complaints were coming in and their cases were being coded as suspended lack of personnel? Were they ever giving any type of communication that something was either happening or not happening with their case, or were they just left in the dark?
Limited. There were some that were limited, but there were others that it quite frankly was left in the dark. They may not have had another contact. There may have been a contact or an attempt, and then it was suspended. I can't state specifically, certainly for every one of them, and I could certainly bring up one of our commanders over, and they could talk you through exactly how that worked then and how it works now, if that would be satisfactory to you. I want to make sure I'm correct.
I think
yes.
I think ultimately, the suspended lack of personnel was one thing, but the lack of communication was another. A lot could have been rectified if people would have just communicated what the circumstances were, what the dilemmas were, to the victims or the complainants and to the public in this body.
You are correct, sir.
As it pertains to 2016, when this code was first being instituted and individuals within the department were being trained, was that just for the investigative division, or was that for other divisions as well?
It was primarily for investigators, so most of them being in investigative divisions, and these are the codes that now, a little more detail. Again, the goal being, well, how many cases are being suspended with a lack of personnel, with the hopes of getting back into those, and the insight and for better reporting. But it was all trained in, as I understand it, to investigators that were in that role and responsibility at that time.
And on page 13, you point to a memo that was put out that is speaking to. It says it's addressed to Troy Finner, but it also has Matt Slinkard, the executive chief. Was Chief Slinkard over investigations, or who was over investigations for the bulk of the time that this code was being instituted?
So, obviously at the beginning, I believe it was Executive Assistant Chief Tim Ottmeyer and Assistant Chief Don McKinney in 2016. And then when that concluded and whenever they retired, then Executive Assistant Chief Troy Finner was made his Executive Assistant Chief over Field Operations, and Matt Slinkard made Executive Assistant Chief over Investigations, and that was in 2017. Then in 2021, Chief Finner became chief. That was under Chief Acevedo. Chief Finner became chief, and then Matthew Slinkard was made executive chief, and then Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones was over investigative and special operations, while I was promoted and put over field operations.
And you had mentioned in your presentation that at one point it was found that this code was being used, and it was a directive put out that under no circumstances when it came to youth-involved crimes should this code be instituted, but it was not conveyed over to the adults.
Yes, sir.
And why? Who made that decision?
So, council member, I don't know. I can tell you the commander at the time who was trying to get the backlog of the child's cases, sex crimes, investigated. And at that time, it was cleared, all those cases, and the directive was, you will not use that. We didn't, we don't backlog any of those cases for children. And I want to make sure I'm speaking properly. I might ask Commander Lorenzana to step up, but that was it. But it was not corrected at the adult sex crimes, and that's all we have right now in terms of the how this happened and what happened. And I don't think that their focus was on the suspended lack of personnel. It was on getting more officers for investigation purposes.
And in this memo you have on page 13, someone writes, I think it may be someone by the name of Jones. It says, Dr. Poore, is this a circular necessary since it only applies to investigations? And then there's someone else that signs and says, route to EOC Jones prior to COP. Does COP mean Chief of Police?
It does.
So is these conversations happening without the Chief of Police at the time being Troy Finner knowing that this communication is being done regarding if it was going to be city department-wide or just for that division?
I have no information that says that Chief Finner was involved in that conversation at that time. And we've all emails, as you well know, as a part of this have been looked at. We don't know. I don't think so. Chief Finner has stated as such, and so I do not think Chief Finner was involved in this conversation regarding what you see on this piece, on this slide deck, on this piece of paper.
And was there anything done in you all's investigation to show that since Chief Slinkard was over investigations, that he took any steps to notify anybody in the executive leadership or anybody underneath that this code should no longer go forward? Like, what was the role of the chief over investigations during this entire time?
So, Councilmember, just to be clear, in 2017, two of my colleagues at that time were promoted to executive assistant chief. Chief Matt Slinkard and Chief Troy Finner under Chief Acevedo. So that was, that time, Chief Troy Finner had field operations, Chief Matt Slinkard had investigative special operations. In 21, when Chief Finner became Chief of Police, Executive Matt Slinkard, Executive Assistant Chief at the time, was promoted to Executive Chief, was not actually in the chain of command, and then because he was handling other duties per our org chart. And at that time, Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones was over investigative and special operations, and I was over field operations.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your thorough presentation and your diligence, and to all of your colleagues. Mayor, I know we also have Ms. Christina Nowak in the audience with the Office of Inspector General, as well as Douglas Griffith with the Houston Police Officers Union. So if there's anything that we believe that they can add to the conversation, I want them to be able to have the floor, if appropriate as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Alcorn.
Thanks, Chief. Great report. I'm impressed by the humility and transparency and honesty both you and former Chief Finner have exhibited during this entire investigation. You know, I was here as a staffer back in 2014. I remember Chief McClellan well. Chief Bradford was a council member. Chief Bradford was a big proponent of getting a work demands analysis done. Figure out how many more officers do we need. I remember the PERF report. I spent some time while you were talking looking back at it. In 2014, the chief sat here, a study the city paid $150,000 for. And the chief and the people performing the report, it was done by a group called Police Executive Research Forum and Justex Systems, Inc. And part of the report said very clearly, HPD does not have sufficient number of officers to investigate the volume, underscored, of workable cases within divisions assigned to the Criminal Investigations Command. It also went on to say that we needed an immediate need for this is 2014, an immediate need for 319 more officers, an immediate need for 101 more investigative operations officers, and 660 more officers, 94 sergeants. They had that all lined out. So 2014, as some might know, our tax rate for the city of Houston per $100 valuation was 63 cents. What happened in 2015? We bumped up against the revenue cap, the voter-imposed revenue cap. Our tax rate has decreased every year since. It went down to 60 cents in 2015. Right now, it's 51 cents. This was a horrible situation at HPD, but the underlying issue is lack of staffing. And we have known this now for 10 years. And I think this is important for the public to know. I appreciate the mayor's wanting to collaborate and get more officers working together, however we can slice this. But ultimately, the public needs to know we cannot have it both ways. We cannot have super low taxes where we're decreasing our tax rate every year and demand that we do a much better job at policing. You are sitting here telling us parts of the department, property parts, everything will suffer. We will suffer. Those won't get investigated. We will definitely do, as we should, the special victims, the assaults, all of the violent crimes. We should do that, but other parts will suffer. We can't have it both ways. This report says nothing else to me than we must go to the voters to increase the revenue cap.
Thank you. Well said. Mayor Pro Tem Castig-Statham.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Alcorn. I totally agree with what you've brought forth. Acting Chief Satterwhite, I had a couple of questions while you were giving this information. I mean, I know we got this today, but we talked a lot about solvability, and I'm curious to know who actually assigned cases, and is that determined by solvability? I don't know how that works, but you were talking about once the code started, and was used throughout the department, that officers were trained on the code, and how do officers get assigned those cases based on solvability?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. So, to be fair, the cases prior to 2016 were suspended, and there could have been other cases that met this criteria. But at that time, they created this code to determine which ones had workable leads that were being suspended, as opposed to those that were already patrol, had already made an arrest, or there were no solvability factors. So when a case comes in, and we have since enhanced all of this case management process to ensure against this. But typically what happens is somebody reports a crime, and patrol responds to that location, meets with the complainant, collects evidence, does an investigation, a primary initial investigation, and then forwards that to the appropriate division. If it's robbery, then it will go to robbery division. If it's if it's an assault, it'll go major assault, family violence. If it's sexual assault, it'll go to special victims division. When it goes there, there will be an incoming personnel that will be responsible for taking those reports and reading them and determining those very things: solvability, complainant wishes to file charges, all of those things. Is it the right place for it to be? Sometimes cases will be forwarded to one division, and they will ultimately learn that it has nothing to do with that. It has something to do with a different division, or maybe it's no crime at all. So there is a review, an initial review at that division. Now, there was a policy in place where those cases could be suspended right there if that case manager that it went to first in the past deemed it no solvability factors, or it was a low threshold potential crime in terms of investigation and outcome of charges or anything, and it might have been suspended. Today, when they come into any division, especially the violent crimes, the divisions regarding violent crime, they have multiple reviews. They have an initial review, and if an investigator or a case manager determines that there's just not enough there's no solvability factors, or if it's something that needs to be inactivated, maybe it's not the right, maybe it's the inappropriate place, it still has to go to a secondary review of a supervisor before it can ever even be inactivated. For any cases that are accepted, they have to go through multiple reviews too, and then there's oversight and multiple reviews. In special victims divisions, there's 3 levels of review now to ensure this doesn't happen. So now, today, our processes are much more, we've put in much more what we call belt and suspenders to make sure that nothing gets through inappropriately or is suspended inappropriately or inactivated, that we want all cases where there are real solvability factors on violent crime to make sure that we're doing everything we can to investigate them. So
after you go through those 3 reviews, does someone assign those cases to an officer?
Correct. So for those cases that are going to be assigned following that review, then it will go to a detective, and the detective will then get the case. It will be added to his or her caseload, and they will be responsible for investigating it, and there's a timeline for which they should accomplish certain things. It adds to the extra workload, all the things that we're looking at, but that's how it goes. And then that investigator detective will take that case to whatever end is appropriate. If we identify a suspect, we have a case, the evidence aligns, and we get charges, well, that person is charged, and then they go into the judicial system.
I'm going to stop you because I want to go back to, so the incoming personnel and the case manager investigation, are those HPD officers?
Yes, ma'am.
So originally, not what we do now, but prior to us talking about this, were those HPD officers the incoming personnel?
To my knowledge, they were still an officer that was receiving or a supervisor. Am I inaccurate in that?
So, Councilmember, just to frame, put in perspective so it's easier to follow, we basically task organized or overarching case management SOP, at least from my command, as directed to a subordinate command as follows. There are 3 levels. The first level, they call it the screener, who screen the cases. Then you have a case management team who's going to manage those cases respectively, and then you have a case management supervisor. Now, those concepts may shift slightly based on contingent upon on the divisional need, but those are the three main themes and three main concepts. The reality is, to get back to your question that you just mentioned, ma'am, we basically task organized into three different types. Those are the mandatory type, that mandatory assignment, basically the violent crime against people, absolutely serious crime. And then you have those discretionary. Those may not elevate to those levels with staffing permit, you go to the discretionary. And a third type is called the monitoring. Perhaps some information is not readily available, or lack of work release at the time, those are monitored. So to put in perspective, staffing-wise, perhaps maybe a combination of civilians and classified officer are divided to screener, case management team, and perhaps a case management supervisor contingent upon the divisional need. In terms of case investigated, those that are mandatory, and there are those that are discretionary, and there are those just for monitoring purposes.
Right. I still don't know who determines the solvability of the case.
The case management team. They come in.
And that's an HPD officer.
It could be a combination of HPD officer and civilians, because there are some civilians that are trained and qualified to do those tasks.
So would the case manager determine if we should use the code?
In terms of what code? The proper disposition code,
The code
yes.
we're talking about.
The case manager determined, case supervisor approved.
Okay. So there's a potential for 3 people to look at this case
Yes, ma'am.
and determine if there is solvability for the case.
Yes, ma'am. Perhaps there's even more, because the truth is the first responding patrol officer will basically take the report as a first level of review right from the get-go.
Okay. Did we ever determine when and who created the code from the inception?
That's part of the code that Chief just briefed. It dated back to 2016. It's way before my time as a member of the command staff, command team. But there are a lot of moving parts that's going around. So with a high level of specificity, I don't see how we can pinpoint. But perhaps there's a lot of gaps we dated back to. It's dated prior to 2016. But it came into inception in 2016 because we tried to correlate with the RMS system that we had at the time. Is that correct, Chief?
Okay. And then my other question is, on page 12, we talked about correcting a child sexual assault investigation, and we said that we would never use the code during a child sexual assault investigation. Why wouldn't we, if we thought that we should never use this code again for a child sexual assault investigation, why wouldn't we use that as a blanket sexual assault investigation? We should never use this code in any sexual assault investigation.
Councilmember, I agree with you. And that was one of the misses at that time in 2017 when it was handled for child sexual assault cases. It wasn't applied to adult sexual assault cases. And that is, throughout my presentation, I listed different times when there were misses where we might have discovered this and dealt with it then, and they're just all misses, and this is one of them.
Whose decision was it to never use the code during a child sexual assault investigation?
I believe it was probably going to be the commander. I wasn't involved in those conversations, but it would have been commander at the time, David Angelo. You know, okay, great.
So the way that the communication started was Lieutenant Colburn had just transferred back into Special Victims Division. He had that conversation with back then Captain Angelo and advised him there was no way that he couldn't stand before anybody and advise anybody that he suspended a case involving a child. So he was the one that convinced Captain Angelo back then to pause utilizing it in the Crimes Against Children unit. And it wasn't transferred over to adult sex crimes. Now that I don't have the answer for. Don't know why that mid-manager didn't bring it to the commander's attention back then.
So now the process is all sexual assault cases will be investigated.
Yes, ma'am. All sexual assaults are
Children, adults, family members, every area of HPD, when there is a sexual assault, there will be an investigation.
Yes, ma'am, they will be.
And the reason I'm harping on that is because on page 14, you said we had a name, a description, a vehicle, and a kit for a sexual assault case. And that's totally different than there's a bicycle in my garage and I don't know who stole it. We had a name, a description, a vehicle, and a rape kit. So it's hard for me to put a parallel on solvability from a bicycle in a garage with no evidence and a name, a description, a vehicle, and a kit.
I mean, yes, there is no correlation between, there is no equivalency there. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This code was inappropriately used. It was in policy, unfortunately, but it was inappropriately used, which is why we are here today. And that's just the truth of it, ma'am. By the way, I don't know, this is Commander Elizabeth Lorenzana. She is our commander over our Special Victims Division today. So at least you know the source of the information and what she's given you.
Thank you. And then on page 13, we talked about this circular on page 13. It's kind of small, so it's hard for me to read it. But you made a comment that Chief Slinker was not in the chain of command. But I think this note that says, should we refer it to the Chief of Police, did that come from Chief Slinker?
Yes, ma'am. So I was just trying to be precise with Councilmember Pollard's question. At that time, Chief Slinkard was the executive chief, right under Chief Finner. But in terms of reporting, in terms of organizational chart, he was not the direct report he was not the person that Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones reported to. Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones reported directly to Chief Finner. Same as me, as Field Operations Executive Assistant Chief, I reported directly to Chief Finner at that time. So
who wrote recommend not issuing? I can't read that handwriting, but who wrote recommend not issuing?
I believe that would have been Chief Jones, Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones. His thought process, as I understand, was this was primarily an investigations thing, and he was trying to correct it in investigations. And then, of course, Chief Slinker agreed, concurred, but said fix it in the standard operating procedures. I'm sorry, they brought a better print for me. So that would have been, yes, Executive Assistant Chief Jim Jones. Again, his logic was he was going to fix it in investigations where the problem primarily existed, and then it was agreed upon on this piece of paper, and it was supposed to be fixed in SOPs. None of that ever happened. None of that ever happened, and therein lies the problem. Part of the problem, that we face here today.
I guess for me it says no circular needed, but should be in all investigative discussions and standard operating procedures. That's a big flag that didn't happen, and this was circulated to several of people in leadership. It didn't make it to the chief because it said to route to EAC Jones prior to COP, and I'm assuming that's Chief of Police.
Right. The intent was for it to go to Chief Jones and then ultimately to Chief Finner. Right now, we do not have anything that says that Chief Finner ever received this specific one. If conversations were had, we don't have any knowledge of those.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Pro Tem Peck.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I know it's been a difficult time for HPD, but I appreciate your leadership in getting us to the other side on this. After the directive was taken to not use this code anymore, do we know how many times it was used after that, and if there were any disciplinary actions taken against anyone who used the code after the directive was given?
The directive on March 1st of this year
Or the
in writing?
directive in, I believe it was November.
Or the November 4th executive staff meeting?
Yeah, in 2021, when the chief stated he directed the Special Victims Division to stop using the code, or in any iteration of using the code and not using the code, do we know how many times it was used after any division was told not to use it? And if any disciplinary actions were taken as a result of that, or anything related to the investigations?
I will have to ask. I do not have that number post. We know it was used after the executive staff meeting that occurred with Chief Fenner stating he did this directive, and that was concurred upon by Chief Slinkard and Chief Jones and Director Poore. A lot of the other people in the room have different accounts. Unfortunately, regardless, it never was enacted because no policy. The process was still stayed in place at the investigative level at all the divisions.
So there were no disciplinary actions taken against any officer or anyone in command staff as a result of all of this?
So if they were operating within policy and the policy still allowed it until March of this year, then they're acting within policy, and we cannot hold an investigator accountable if they're following the policy and the training. That's why I say the real fail that we had was not following up, not making sure, and we all have to own that at the executive level.
Okay. When it comes to crime rates and reports, is it correct that the crime rate numbers that we've been given all of these years would be correct because that still information was taken by HPD, so we would still know the number of incidents that happened, but it's the clearance rates that are not accurate? Is that correct?
So those numbers will adjust, and they will adjust because we have NIBRs and we are working through that as we investigate these cases. So those numbers will adjust. I know I have Director Cummins that can, why don't you speak specifically to that?
Sure. So specific to that issue, we had approximately 34,000 incidents that were missed or that were retitled after this initial review out of the 266. 8,000 of them were titled originally investigation type cases and were found to contain criminal elements that needed to be reported. So those 8,000 incidents will then be adjusted in the NIBRS counts over those years between January of 2018 and present. They get counted in the month for which the crime occurred. So the crime rate itself, given the number, would not adjust, but the crime totals will, and the clearance rates certainly will.
Okay. So as the command staff looked at the reports over the years, we've been told 10 plus years that every, when you're looking at staffing for different divisions, it's all done by the numbers that are coming in, and people are allocated based on what the numbers show. And so I'm wondering, as the command staff were looking at these numbers and seeing so-called clearance rates, were they seeing numbers, here's the number of crimes and here's how many were cleared and that's great? Or was it broken down into these weren't really cleared, they're just suspended? And did anyone from the command staff know that maybe we needed to beef up investigations because of that? So I'm just wondering how far it was broken down for the command staff to actually see what was cleared and why.
Very early on, there was a standardized DDS report that was created. You'll read about it more in the report. And it did standardize the reporting of those codes. Over time, the divisions adjusted their reports, and they were not standardized currently. So while they were still reporting numbers, they were not always reporting the same thing. They also, because of some deficiencies in our RMS, are very dependent upon divisional case management databases, access databases that are separate and apart from our RMS, which puts us in a situation where the divisions are really solely responsible for managing the data, reporting the data. It did limit our department-wide ability to audit to the level that I see us doing so moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for being here, Chief, for being the next man up when we needed some leadership and for sitting in the hot seat today. So I've got a few questions for you. I'm impressed with the report. I know a lot of work went into it. I hope it'll be the catalyst for some real change that we need, and so perhaps we will have that as a silver lining in this dark chapter that HPD has had to go through. Two things that you said. This was a failure of systems and a failure of leadership. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So all the men and women we have patrolling our streets and keeping us safe, this was not their fault?
No, sir. This is at our level.
Okay. Relatively small number of folks in the upper levels of the department. And I'm trying to understand, Chief, and I hope you'll help me, mindset or attitude that exists where someone doesn't jump up and say, you know what, it's not a good idea to allow a violent crime case with workable leads to be coded suspended, to be inactivated. And I'm wondering why that was allowed to happen. Can you help me understand that?
Sir, I really can't. I'm in agreement with you.
Mm-hmm. When I was at the DA's office, we had a policy in place that no matter how long you'd been there, no matter how high up in leadership you were, you had to try 2 cases a year, right? So you never forgot what it was like to work with a victim. You never forgot what it was like to deal with the difficulties, the practical difficulties in prosecuting a case. And I'm wondering, might some sort of policy like that requiring HPD leadership to maintain at least a small caseload so that they keep their hands in it and they stay fresh regarding who they're working for and what it takes to solve a case. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea, sir. I mean, going back into the field or in investigations is really important to maintain awareness, contact, touch with the officers in the field, whether it is patrol and running calls or in the field for any type of event we might have or catastrophe or an investigation. So I think it's a great idea and certainly something else that we can add, which is, but in practice, many of us already go into the field and do different things. But I can't tell you the last time I did personally an investigation where I was the investigator for certainly for a homicide or anything like that. I'm usually in a different role when I'm on those scenes. So it's it's worth looking at and exploring. I will also say, when you ask me why somebody wouldn't raise their hand on this, and I understand, sir, what you're going at because I feel the same way. Again, these investigators are getting an incredible number of cases thrown upon them because there's not enough of them. And so even they are doing some triage. So work cases with workable leads, but they're still not that strong. They probably, I can only imagine, a bit, probably said, I'm going to work on this case that I know I can make, and they maybe suspended the other. It's not an excuse. I'm not trying to make one for any of us. I'm just trying to tell you how somebody might do something where it's a weak case but still got workable leads and a violent crime, how that might happen. I just really don't know.
I get that, but it's the leadership level that I'm wondering about. Mm-hmm. Somebody didn't jump up and say, no, we can't do this. And so I wonder if it wouldn't be wise to have a voice or two in the room, maybe civilians with expertise in systems, leadership, great leadership skills, to sometimes be a voice of reason and say, we can't do this. We shouldn't do this.
Yes, sir. That I absolutely 1,000% agree. Having people in the room to raise those those counter arguments or suggestions, or we need that all the time. You always need somebody looking, and everybody on the team needs to be looking at consequences so that we can make the best decisions. So it's a practice that we have that we're going to increase, along with the quality assurance and quality control measures that we put in. And the order for everybody is, don't be a yes man or a yes woman. I need to know. Good, that's the thing.
Thank you for that. Chief Ten, did you want to add something?
Yes, sir, Council Member. I just want to, point well taken, but I do want to really distinguish the 2 points that we're talking about. I think once the investigator gets assigned to the cases, they actually do an exceptional job. I think the gap, the delinquency, is the case management, the understanding of case management. So, sir, to fulfill your intent, with your vision, what it should be, to make what right looks like, the goal is to train all management at every single level to understand case management and case assignment. The training that we will incorporate in the extremely near future, not just training, but recurrent training, will have that component to it. Like the Director and I have been discussing, we will include every single chain along the level to understand what case management really is.
I understand it, and I appreciate that. Well, I'm thinking more in terms of someone to say, look, this isn't a good idea. Or even if it is accepted that somebody else jumps up and says, we need to have parameters. We can never use this code for a violent crime case with solvable leads, for instance, that sort of yes, leadership.
Yes, sir.
But thank you. And you spoke eloquently about the need for more officers, and this has always been the case, it seems like, as long as I can remember. When I proposed the 6th Academy class as a budget amendment that was adopted, we talked in budget workshop about what would it take, to fill a 6th Academy class. And if I recall correctly, you were in the room, the initial reaction was, we can't do it. We don't have the resources, we don't have the facilities. Instead of, we have to do it, And now you presented some of those same slides that shows in 2 of the last 4 years, we lost more officers through attrition than we gained through the academy. And so I'm glad we're going to have that additional academy class, but I hope there's the mindset in leadership and in recruiting to do what's necessary to fill it. And I've told you, and I've told your director, your commander over recruiting, that hey, this is on all of us when we're going to help you. So just let us know how we can best help you put more officers on the streets. I know more officers on the streets not going to solve all our problems, but it's a part of the solution.
Yes, sir. Agreed, sir. And yeah, I very clearly remember we were sitting right here when that was said. They can't, but thank you for pressing, because we very quickly and said we can and we will. And you and the mayor, and thank you all for approving that. So, but yes, we have to do everything we can, and we rely on all of you and everybody to help us in recruiting. We need good men and women to take on this job for the future of the city and to keep everybody safe. So all that you can do in that, I greatly appreciate.
Okay, we have to. So let us know how we can help. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Before I go any further, do you need a break?
I'm fine, sir. But if everybody else would like one, it's certainly fine, too.
That means yes.
It's,
I don't break up the flow, but I do not want you to sit there if you need a 5-minute break.
Mayor, you'll take one?
Well, we've
already
yeah, we cheated. Fine. We all went to the restroom.
I am fine. I knew up front this was going to be a long meeting. And said as much.
Would
but
you like some
fine.
water then?
I will take another bottle of water. That would be awesome.
We'll get you a bottle of water, although that's going to compound the other issue.
Well, sir.
Raise your hand if you'd like to take a quick break. But anyway, Councilwoman Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. And, thank you, Chief Satterwhite. First off, I'd like to just acknowledge something that we haven't, and certainly your report's very thorough and great.
heartbreaking, most importantly for the victims. And I think we need to certainly continue to acknowledge that the families, the victims and their families, certainly I know many of the faces out here behind you, and I know that you all carry that burden every day. And it's quite shocking, quite painful to hear all this. You know, coming into office, I was aware that there was a significant problem with our fire department, and to learn that, you know, now we're facing the issues with our police department. But you can't unring a bell. And in 2014, as Councilmember Alcorn pointed out, that bell started ringing and has been ringing since. The fact that you need more resources, that you need officers, and also, too, the reality of when this code started being used, you know, like it's a policy, and so the officers are using it, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. We really can't debate that now, but certainly it's almost a decade now of using this code. So, you know, fast forward, here we are, and recognizing the report is out, we all want to know better, do better, be better. To Councilmember Ramirez's point, a couple of questions for you. One is, has this or will this impact your ability to recruit, and how can we help, and or what are the plans moving forward to kind of clean this up and really push towards recruitment? And certainly I think everyone at the Horseshoe is willing to work with you and wants to work with you to help you in those efforts. And now that one, and then I'll wrap it all up in one. And also, too, on the number of cases that somehow have been sitting on the back shelf for all this time, what is the statute of limitations? How does that impact some cases that will never, you know, have an answer that we've been, you know, we've passed the limit for? Can you have an answer for that one?
Yes, ma'am. First question is, how does it impact recruiting? And we're having some success at recruiting. We're going to as many places and many venues as possible in an effort to reach potential candidates for this job. The good news is if you can meet the qualifications, we don't have an upper age limit. So I'm looking around. So, no, but truly, we can, yes. So we're going to do that. We're a good department, okay? I know I'm telling a very bad story, and it hurts because, I mean, this is my department, and it hurts severely. But it's a good department that does great work every day, and it responds to catastrophic events, and people put it on the line. And I think the public sees that. Now, like I said earlier, we enjoy a lot of support from the public. We're not perfect, but we enjoy a lot of support. And with that comes other potential young men, young women, or older that look at it and say, you know, for a second career, this is something I might want to do. So will this hurt us in recruiting? I hope not. And because I know people want to be a part of a first-class organization, and we are. This happened. It happened primarily because we just don't have the staffing. We're taking measures to fix that, and hopefully we'll get more staffing. And that's what we need. We need recruits. So I haven't really seen a drop-off yet, and I hope that none of us do. In terms of statute of limitations, there are crimes that have a statute of limitations. We all know that. There is no statute of limitations on sexual assault. So there's no statute of limitations on homicide. On the most serious, there's no statute of limitations. For others, there are, and to be, you know, full honesty, there are cases that are already beyond statute of limitations that we will not be able to charge in. That's true. And that will happen, and certainly on property crime even more, because it's property crime investigations that are going to suffer because we are focused on violent crime.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, I am proud of our Houston Police Department. I've always been a big supporter, will continue to be, and want to help you all in any way. And again, heartbreaking, but I can only imagine the load that you all carry. So thank you, and God bless you all for being here today to support, and thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Evans Shabazz.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief Satterwhite, and thank you to all the HPD officers who put their lives on the line. Just can't imagine what you face daily, but we do know that without you, we would really have a big problem, and we really thank you for your service. My first question, I guess I was going to ask about the statute of limitations. So you don't really have an adequate number as to how many cannot be investigated. I know which ones can in terms of whether they're crimes against property or sexual assault, but you don't have data regarding how many cannot be investigated due to statute of limitations, correct?
So yes, correct. I don't have the exact number. We actually are looking into that because as much as we can, the public needs to know that's part of transparency for those cases that have exceeded the statute of limitations. But I don't have an exact number for you right now, Councilmember. I'm so sorry about that, but I can follow up and find it for you.
Okay. Also, in the subsequent investigation, have we determined that there were cases that there was lack of evidence and should not have been investigated that are included in that number? That could, no one wants to have a case that is not investigated, but if there's no evidence, do you have data regarding how many of those could not have been investigated due to lack of evidence?
So, yes, ma'am. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I think I can get that for you. The simple fact is, and you bring up something that I really didn't speak a lot about because we have real victims, right? And that's our focus. But yes, of that, there were thousands upon thousands of cases that we've already discovered were just miscoded. Arrests were made, and for some reason it was coded as suspended lack of personnel, or there were no leads whatsoever, or the complainant did not want to press charges. In some ways, the code was used more liberally than it really should have been applied to, because as we opened up those cases, we found out that there was no workable leads or nothing else, and it's a case that probably would not have gone forward anyway. Again, we have real victims, so I'm being careful about that. But there are thousands upon thousands of cases that were just improperly coded, frankly.
And my final question, because that 2018 email was discussed in this report, was there anything in that email that referred to an SL code to which, or was it just a report of an incident that Chief Finner said that it was not acceptable? Was there any reference in that email to a SL code?
So it was a case that wasn't worked and was handled that way. And so I think you take it for what it is here. Him stating it's unacceptable, I think the reason being is it's been in the news, and we're trying to be completely transparent with everything and not hiding anything. Okay, so that's why everything is here, right, and everything's in the report. So the actual conversation about SL specifically, I don't think is there. I think it's just about the cases being suspended whenever it shouldn't have been. Chief Finner appropriately saying it's unacceptable. It was an opportunity, like all of the others, to maybe, hopefully, somebody figured out something or followed up. It just wasn't done. And that's why I say the fails in this are all at the leadership level. I'm a part of that leadership. The fails, we are not saying that the fails lie at the investigator level. It's us.
Okay, my reason for asking is because if there was no reference to an SL code, then there was nothing that would have brought that to light for Chief Finner to remember that this was addressed in 2018. My point is, if it wasn't an SL code and he was actually just responding to an inappropriate investigation, then is it fair to say that he was not dishonest and saying that he did not know about that in that particular 2018 email? Because people are saying, and it really kind of bothers me, people are saying that he was lying and he was not being honest. But if it was not mentioned in there, and God forbid remembering a 2018 email, I would challenge anybody to remember that. but certainly one that didn't make reference to an SL code, then perhaps he was being honest and saying that he did not know about it at that time. Is that pretty accurate?
In 2018, it's very fair, Councilmember, and I'll say that like this. We have so much coming at us all the time. The things, I mean, the very next day can be something else large that we need to pivot and respond to, and we see it all the time. So I'll bet Chief Finner did not remember at all that email, years earlier. It's like anything else. It's at every given point there was an opportunity that we missed. I say, when things like this happen in an agency, there's always going to be a lot of scrutiny, and those of us at the top are going to receive the most scrutiny, and we're going to be held accountable. I mean, it hurts us all, but I do not believe that Chief Finner remembered a 2018 email as he was making public announcement at all. I mean, I would not remember.
I just want to dispel that he was being dishonest.
Sure, I understand.
And that's my point, because at that point he was very emphatic. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anybody else responded on that email to say that it was inappropriate and to investigate. Mm-hmm. And he's always maintained his responsibility and move forward to try to get things resolved. So I just want to dispel, I've gone toe-to-toe with people saying, well, he lied. Well, I just want to dispel publicly that I do not believe that he lied. Mm-hmm. I do not believe that because it was not referred to, that he should have remembered, and that I thought he was doing a fine job. And so I want to speak publicly regarding that, and I appreciate you. I've known you and your character and your integrity, and I believe that you are doing a fine job as well. And so thank you so very much for your candor.
Thank you.
Councilmember Flickinger.
Thank you, Mayor. I was a little shocked when the big number came out as to how many cases hadn't been worked. I think it was the next day that I saw a post, I think from Charles Blaine, which I believe was the same clip you showed earlier, about how it had been discussed a decade before, the number of cases that hadn't been worked, and the fact that you didn't have enough personnel to actually work all the cases. And it was also stated at that time that every large city has the exact same issue. So I assume today we still don't have enough personnel to work all the cases as well. Is that correct?
Councilmember, we have fewer people today than Chief McClellan had 10 years ago.
Okay. So it's very understandable where this gap occurred. I think there was really two misses. One was obviously in the prioritization of what got worked and what didn't get worked, which you've already addressed.
Yes, sir.
The second one, I believe, is more of a transparency issue, and I'm not even sure if transparency is the right word, but it wasn't highlighted to the public that this many cases every month aren't being worked because we don't have enough people. I would strongly suggest that going forward, until we have enough people to work all the cases, and that may never be the case, that we tell the public monthly, we had this many cases, this is the bandwidth we had to work the cases, this is what's left over. And I think that'll get kind of to Councilman Alcorn's point, that the public will know, this is what we're paying for, this is what we get. If we want to get more, we're going to have to pay more for it. And at least give them a better understanding of what the situation is and how it is. And they may say, we don't want to pay any more money, that we're happy with the level of service that we get. I don't know, but at least the public can be informed and actually make that decision. The other thing I got a question about is slide number 5, the staffing levels. You've got authorized, classified, and civilian, and then actual, classified, and civilian. I assume authorized is the same as budgeted. Would that be correct?
No, sir. Because every year, and ours is the largest portion of the city's budget at $1 billion. 92% of that is personnel. So we are using up every dollar y'all are giving us. either for people or for equipment or for other compliance and things that we have to do, or for overtime. So if, just for example, if you look at today, and you see authorized today at 6,405 officers, where our actual number is 5,211, and then you take that delta, which is approximately 1,200, and then you figure what the cost of that is. It's about it's going to cost an extra 170 to probably 200 million. By the time you add the employee salary and benefits, and then you add the training and the equipment and all the other things that are going to go in, so we need an extra $200 million.
Okay.
These are real numbers, and what we have is what we're trying to hire towards and grow, and so that number will fluctuate. And you know what? I have Director Smith in the room. Maybe bring her up. But it's going to cost more. And I don't know any other way to say it. It's going to cost a lot more. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon. So I think the question is the authorized the same as the budgeted number? And so for classified, it's unique because under the authorized, for those individuals less than a sergeant, an officer or a senior officer, there are actually more authorized numbers because of the way we move in our system. They may be a cadet, then they go to probation, and then they go to an officer. So they have to have movement in order to do that. And so that's why you see a larger number of authorized. And then we have the budgeted number, and that is what we anticipate in terms of the attrition and in terms of the cadets coming in. And so you will see a different number for authorized versus budget. Is that?
Okay.
I know it's a lot.
And what about, does the same thing apply with the civilian side of it?
No.
Okay.
What you see is what's...
Because you're about 10% below your authorized number on civilian, a little over 10%, and just under 20% less for classified.
No, for civilian, it is actually the number. It's number to number. If we wanted more, then we would have to come to you and ask for an additional number. Okay. So for classified, it's a little different because we would have to come back every quarter to ask for more. So that gives us that flexibility.
So are the funds there to hire the extra 10% of civilian? To go from the 878 to the 981?
So the funds are there when you count the attrition. So we have to budget. We don't budget for the full number. We have to budget for what we anticipate being the actual number that we're going to have. So we have to actually balance that number out.
Okay, so the 939 civilian are not budgeted for either.
So yes, it's budgeted, but what I am saying is that we know that we're going to have people coming and going during the year. Right. So when you do a budget, you anticipate that attrition. And so when we budget for that total number less the attrition that we anticipate.
Okay, so you've budgeted for 939 less the attrition.
Yes.
So we don't have 939 that's budgeted for. I mean, if we've got 5% attrition, it'd be 939 minus 5%, right?
So, yes, but we have to manage that internally.
Okay.
So in the budget, we have 939. So that means that we have 939 positions that we can actually hire, but we know that we have to account for attrition. I mean, that's just the way we do the budget. And so we have that opportunity to budget for that 939 with anticipation of some attrition.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Why don't you explain to them, if you wanted to increase that number, we've got to furnish you the money, because you're working within the boundaries of what the council budgets you. So if we wanted to go back, if you want to add a couple of hundred, you don't have the resources for that.
Yeah, and essentially I was saying if we get up
What you're trying
to,
to say, I mean, it's not nearly as complicated as I'm trying to understand.
so thank you.
Where you work within, there's going to be some attrition, there's going to be coming and going. Bottom line is, you got a fixed police budget, and they can estimate what their needs are. Well, not even their needs. We've already documented they're not getting their needs. But the authorized amount is pretty much fixed at that 900 level.
Yes, sir.
So if you want to go 100, like we increased the cadet class, there wasn't money in the original proposed budget for 6, so it was approved. We had to find the money.
no,
So if you
essentially I
want
was
to
asking,
increase
do we
your
have enough,
civilian, or you're certified, you got to come up with the money.
yeah, I was saying, do we have enough money to get up to the authorized amounts in the
Hell
budget?
no.
And we don't, to get up to that full amount, because we know we're going to be less because we have attrition.
Attrition. And then we have, as the mayor has mentioned, we have a certain dollar amount that we're given.
Yeah.
In terms of the budget. It's limited.
And
if
the
we
dollar
know
amount is included attrition.
And if we know that it's going to be different, then we go to the administration and finance and say, hey, we actually are seeing that number go up. Please allow us to have additional funding for that.
Well, hopefully y'all will be asking for that.
Another problem, directors and chiefs under other administrations are not allowed to ask for more than what they know they're going to get. Because the politics is such, and I've experienced in Austin for years, it's present here coming into our administration. And that's one reason we got such a mess. I mentioned transparency. You got to allow chiefs, fire, police, public works, everyone show you what their needs are that are not being met, and then it's our responsibility. But you're not going to have previous chiefs sit down here in this horseshoe. I mean, just watch it before we got here and say, I've got to have 500 more officers, and it's going to cost this. Or we got a heck of a problem. They're just not allowed to be that transparent until certainly now. I want to know what your challenges are and what you need. And then it's our responsibility.
No, in kind of reiterating.
But there's controls in place before we even get to this horseshoe.
Kind of reiterating the transparent piece, I really think if we put out a report once a month telling the public what we weren't able to do, and obviously the prioritization needs to be right, let the public decide what they want to do.
No, Councilmember, I agree. There's some really great ideas coming out here. Councilmember Ramirez, in terms of us doing some of the other things, I mean, to maintain that connection to what we all learned when we came on this department, many years ago. I mean, I agree. So thank you. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done. Really appreciate it. You and the whole department.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
I just want to make sure to assure you that.
Young, but I was around because we had such a shortage and the crime rate was going so high in the early 90s. Bob Lanier, his first administration, canceled a monorail between downtown and Galleria and put the equivalent of 500 officers on the street overtime. So there's ways you can do it. Obviously, as Councilman Alcorn articulated, tell the public the true picture and tell them we got to have additional funding. On the other hand, we got other pockets that we can and will look to for some immediate relief. I'm sorry, did you?
I was just going to assure that we work very closely with the administration in terms of sharing what our needs are, especially on the civilian side, which we do see that there's an additional need for that, and so we appreciate that collaboration.
One last thing.
That's a good political answer. You know good and well. You know darn well, and you and I have worked together for 30 years.
I would also
that you're restricted from giving some of the challenges publicly until they're worked out.
I would also think probably the quickest way to benefit the security of the city is through the civilian, because I would think you'd be able to bring them on a lot faster than what you could police officer.
Yes, sir. So we would love to really climb, in terms of civilians. They're awesome partners, and they do so much. I just had a conversation with Controller Chris Hollins, and we were talking about some of the budgeting things that we've already brought forward. We talked about the more pay for cadets and higher pay for to compete. We also talked about the EPRO program, which are retired police officers with lots of experience, have already been CJIS, met CJIS requirements and everything else. I mean, to me, personally, it just seems like such an obvious, another way to quickly help our department. They're part-time, they're not full-time, but they know their stuff, and they could help, they could come in, they could make those calls too. So between increasing civilians, which we could do a lot faster, and increasing the EPRO program, which are retired officers coming back on a part-time basis, we could do some good things. And those are quick hits and quick fixes.
And don't forget forensics. Patrol officers can make their arrests, investigators can file the cases, but if they got to wait a year on a ballistic test, it's a huge problem that's underfunded.
I took a tour through the DA's office yesterday, and those exact same comments were made by the DA's office.
Absolutely. Councilman Martinez.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, just want to first start off by saying thank you for continuing to see this report out and sharing this with us. It's very thorough. As enlightening as it is, it's also been known, as you mentioned, when you first started. So I want to thank your command staff. I know a lot of y'all, we either East Side, Southeast, Central, South Central. I've seen the work that y'all do, and I know y'all are committed to Houstonians. So in light of that, and in the mindset of being transparent and honest, you've mentioned a couple of times where some of the cases were put inappropriately or liberal. Were there instances where there was an abuse of the SL code? And if there were, have they been addressed?
So it's not, I don't have an instance of an abuse of the SL code, and I probably should be careful with that. What I mean by that is the code was there, and I think it might have been, a lot of cases were by accident, probably inaccurately coded as SL. Patrol made an arrest, but we found that out when we reviewed it. Well, Patrol made the arrest. This person was already charged, but somehow or another, it could happen when you're sitting at that terminal and you're entering data that you make a mistake and it gets entered. So I'm not ready to say that anybody nefariously did anything. I'm just saying that there were cases that were improperly coded, a lot of them, and as they were coded as suspension or suspended lack of personnel when they should have been coded as arrest, patrol arrest, or coded as something else. Again, there are lots of ways a case can be cleared, not just charges filed. There's a lot, and we have that whole part of our SOP now of all the ways and avenues, and we're training officers on that to make sure that we're as accurate as possible. So, no, I do not have that in terms of, that we're disciplining anybody for specifically suspending it when they intentionally suspend it. We do have a couple of admitted this was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And so they wasn't intentionally following policy, so there may be some type of cite for that. Sometimes accidents happen.
And I appreciate that answer, and I think, again, to ensure that the public, I say this, I know being out in the community with you all, the community appreciates you and trusts you, but I know that there's been some break in trust, and so just to ensure that we do continue to build that trust with community. And you mentioned, that the training that's happening and the list of recommendations, I definitely would love to see a continuous conversation about how those recommendations are being met, when they're being met. One in particular, and you mentioned the 55-hour training with Hawk. I've had several conversations with Sonia Corrales, and she's brought this to my attention that historically she's been wanting to come in and have these conversations with HPD. So I'm very happy to see partnerships like that happen, because at the end of the day, HPD cannot do it all. And there are resources, there are collaborations, there are partnerships, even the community. One thing that stood out is that, we're going to start seeing an increase in property crime possibly, or a lack of response to property crime. And to get ahead of that, I think we need to make sure that the community, who is, I believe, is the police department's first line of collaboration, are informed about how to avoid being a victim of property crime. What does that look like? How do you roll that out? How can our offices help support you all with that as well? So I look forward to those partnerships as well with my office. And then I'll just wrap up with this, and it's Councilmember Alcorn hit the nail on the head. It's not new, as I mentioned to you. We're understaffed at HPD. HFD has been going through turmoil as well, lack of staffing in different spaces, infrastructure, deferred maintenance, and being here at City Hall for the past 10 years, recognizing that one of the reasons why I wanted to run was because I wanted to put that reset button and really right-size things that have been going on and just allowed, unfortunately. And we can blame it on, we don't have the funds for it. But if we want to be very honest and transparent with community about what services you want, starting off with public safety, then we go into infrastructure. The deferred maintenance has been going on and I've said this around the Horseshoe plenty of times. It's not just 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It goes back even further than that when you look at some of the different city facilities. There's been opportunities here around the Horseshoe to keep the tax rate even during a disaster. And as difficult, I saw the conversation with council members at that time. It was a difficult conversation. But we're paying the price for it now because there is no action taken at that point. And as the mayor, has stated just a bit ago, this is across every department. And, I think it's risen to the top with HFD and HPD because it's public safety and it's been a priority for community. But we really need to own this as a council. It's probably not the best political thing to say that, we need a trash fee. We need to look at the revenue cap. Nobody wants to do that because then you go back into the community and they're saying, well, now you're increasing my taxes. But at some point, this position should be used in a way where we are actually servicing community. And unfortunately, to all of us, I have a family of 4, and a trash fee might cost me sitting down with my son for coffee, a few times out a month. But those things are needed. And I don't want to make it seem, just with my instance, I know there's challenges out there for growing up in a family of 12 and making sure food's important and shelter's important. But at the end of the day, the city as a whole needs to step up as well. But it starts with us and being honest, unapologetic sometimes in the community to say this is what it costs. And so I look forward to, making sure that we have this conversation, honest conversation. The controller said, there's no plan. There's been a plan, and it's called, the revenue cap. And it's called the trash fee. I've heard the trash fee for years. It's not something new. There is a plan. We just need to start acting on these things. And so as I look at the staffing, slide 3, population continues to increase and services continue to decrease. And at the end of the day, it's going to cost. And so my hope is that working with this administration and my colleagues that are sitting around this horseshoe today can actually make some real changes. And so, again, just as unfortunate as, this has become, the impacts that it made to families across Houston, hopefully we can come out better. And I think we can only do that, again, with being honest with ourselves and being transparent with the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Satterwhite, let me commend you for such a great presentation. It wasn't easy, and as I could very well see, it wasn't easy for any of us. You and I have had conversations relative to, HPD, who I hold in high regards. We have, and I agree with you, we have the finest department, both in first responders of HPD as well as in our HFD. And I commend all of the men and women who are out there every day doing what they do. I just had a few concerns. The old saying is never say never. And certainly the problems that we have within HPD. I brought up an issue some time back about having HPD to come and make an address to this council. And you know, I indicated sometime weekly, but even if it was monthly, just like the comptroller comes and make a monthly report. So the concerns and issues that are going on within our city and our department need to be made relevant to the council. I also say that it's never saying never. It has been stated about dollars and cents. The issue around this case is 10 years, started in 2014. 2014, when Chief McCullum stood and said that it was 20,000 cases then. The mayor's always iterated about transparency. It's not like we didn't know. It wasn't like this council at the time didn't know. We two administrations passed to where we are today with this 264,000. So you do the math at 20,000 cases, or whether there's evidence or not, over 10 years, it's well above that 20,000, probably 21, 22,000. So transparency is on the table. You can't ignore it. Now, we can talk about dollars, and and like I say, I never say never when it comes to what we do in order to adequately supply the police department or any of our departments with money they needed. You know, things that are, we always talk in dollars and cents, but we have to make dollars make sense. And sometimes it's not the fact that you have lack of dollars, but it's how you utilize the dollars. And of course, there's so many areas where the mayor has looked into where there's been just reckless spending. So, but we have to prioritize. But I do want to ask the question concerning demotions. Since this investigation been done internally, as well as this investigation been done subsequent, the mayor picked a committee to look into this. 2 officers have been demoted. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2 people in the administration investigation side has been demoted. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then we've had the chief to retire. Now, early on, Mayor Pro Tem Tatum asked some questions pertaining to the investigation of people there. During this whole process. Now, Chief Slinkard was the chief over the operations of investigation, correct?
So he was the executive assistant chief over investigative and special operations under Chief Acevedo.
Got it.
When under Chief Finner, he was the executive chief and not over investigations.
Okay, so looking at the line, the chain of people of responsibility, somebody has to know something about what somebody does. I think that's my biggest concern. You know, it's always been the problem solving. 3 things is always asked. How did we get here? What are we going to do now that we're here? And what are we going to do so we don't go back to it?
Correct.
In this situation, it was coding. Coding was the issue, which the number of non-investigated cases wasn't new. In 2014, Chief McCullum said 20,000. So it wasn't like they didn't know. People knew. And the department was making that made known. So again, whoever that came up with the idea of using the coding to say we're undermanned, we're understaffed, we don't have enough people, then that should have been somebody made that decision. I don't know who. I don't think it's been revealed as to who it is. I think that's one of the reasons why, of course, the mayor can correct me, was the problem, and he stated publicly, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to find out who made this issue of coding. So that's a concern, a deep concern, transparency. Last thing I want to discuss is the fact that, you know, I literally worked in the county. I did a volunteer for grand jury, the grand jury. I spent, days working the grand jury. And one of the horrifying things in the grand jury when you serve is they bring in cases on top of cases of sexual assaults that happened years prior. And the cases just stack. And it's horrific to see sexual assault cases of minors, of cases that never get solved. So backlog of cases is a serious thing. It's really a black mark on, or dark mark, whichever, on the department, which don't deserve it. So I would hope in the future that we make sure that not only this time it was coding, let's pray that there's nothing else that would create this type of black eye on our department, who is one of the best in the country, in my personal opinion. And I hope that transparency and reporting is something that we all require, because it's not deserving of the men and women who serve this department each and every day. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember. What you're saying is quit kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, which turns into a barrel.
Yeah, I understand. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor. And just briefly, I know that this didn't happen for lack of caring, because nobody becomes a police officer because they want to miss every birthday or every holiday or every anniversary. They do it because it's a calling. And I know the commitment that all of you have to this department and to the city. And so I just want to say thank you for taking the steps to resolve this and just make sure that it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief Satterwhite, for the very thorough and hard look into what has happened. It's a necessary step in figuring out where those missteps were and how to move forward, ensuring we don't encounter this or something similar again. My question is about thinking through what triggers an audit, what triggers an investigation. When looking at the recommendations, when looking at the findings, has there been any consideration into looking at what along the way would have triggered an audit or investigation prior to 2024?
Yes, sir. So there were actual audits that were conducted, state and department-wide, within our department. There are, in terms of compliance, there are sometimes that are audits that are required every year or every 2 years, depending on the division or what they're investigating. So there were, and those, as I kind of articulated earlier, were opportunities that were missed to discover this. Again, I think until 21, the November 4th meeting, there wasn't a lot of dialogue at all about the code itself. There was the dialogue about backlogs, about children's sexual assault cases that needed to be followed up on, about, FSGI or failure stock, other cases that were suspended, but it wasn't necessarily the thought. It was about, we got to investigate these cases. It wasn't until that November 4th meeting, and really that year that earlier correspondence that the issue of the actual code itself emerged, and so there were audits along the way that were misses to find this, to see this. So that's a miss. And then, of course, there was the actual, when it was finally brought forward, there was efforts and well-intentioned efforts by executives to make corrections. Unfortunately, at all of our levels, it just did not get down to the troops, and that's a miss.
Got it. Well, I think, what y'all have found and what is being recommended will go a long way in increasing the transparency and increasing opportunities to prevent those misses. And that's going to help restore trust to the public, which, as we talk about safety, as we talk about ways to help increase our ranks. That may include going to the public, for exemptions and whatnot. And trust is going to be very vital.
Correct.
And so I think this is a good first step in that rebuilding process. Thank you,
sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I know you got to have a break. Need a break now.
I will take one, sir.
Remember transparency.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and thanks to your command staff and everyone involved. We have a great city and great people and a great police department that's just had to do with too little resources for a number of years. And this leads to a disaster that you've described, but we have put a halt to those labels, and we will continue to pursue the backlog and review them. And you've represented yourself and your department very well today, and thank you to your entire team. Members, we're going to have pop-off. I can't imagine, but for Chief Satterwhite, I'll be with you and shortly for your press availability in my proclamation room right outside my office.